Hello humans of the internet, my name is Mr.Fumpledump here with a very special video. This video is not only the first video to start off my YouTube channel, but this video will also showcase my very first Game Jam game that I submitted for DreamHack Summer Jam. So without further ado, let's begin. The reason why I decided to do a game jam is because many other developers have said that doing a game jam can be a very valuable experience, whether you're learning how to make games, learning how to code, or learning how to make art. And as someone who's dabbled with creating their own games in Unity, I could definitely use more experience with making games, especially when it comes to making games fast. So, how I found DreamHack Summer Jam was I just went on GameJolt, looked for any game jam that looked nice and professional, and I picked that one. Granted, there were other reasons why I picked DreamHack. One, it had a prize, which is always motivating when you're making something. Not only because the top prize was $1,000, but also because the top 5 would get their game showcased, which is a lot more valuable to me than just $1,000. Granted, I knew I wasn't going to be able to get any of the prizes. Secondly, and the most important factor about the DreamHack Summer Game Jam, was that you had about a week to finish the game, unlike other jams that give you 48 hours. As I've said before, first game jam. I don't know about that one, Chief. I don't think I'm gonna be able to do that. So I went with a week. But enough about the details. It's time to assemble my team for making this game. Once I had picked my game jam, I got some of my friends to help me out. This included my friends Jacob and Nick. Here's a little thing about me. I am probably the worst person to come to when it comes to music. It just doesn't click with me like it does everything else I do. Jacob is the exact opposite. If you ever been with Jacob for a normal amount of time, you'll know that Jacob will randomly just start drumming at anything he can find, playing his guitar, playing on his keyboard in a call or something, or playing on the kazoo, because the kazoo is the greatest instrument known to man. This man knows how to make music, so obviously I got him to help me with my game. Now on to Nick. Nick is my one friend who, on many occasions, I'll ask him to critique my art and give feedback on what I should change in order to make it look good. He usually remembers the technical side of art, which is very helpful for me because I just do art and I'm like, this looks good. And then Nick will be over here like, John, I don't really think these colors are working together, and then I'll go fix it. So I asked him to join me in making some of the art for the game. He said yes, and my crew was assembled. Now all we had to do was wait for that good old theme to be announced. Oh man. After watching a surprisingly interesting car ride, the theme was finally announced. The theme was Magic vs. Science, and ooh man, that is a fun theme right there. Time for me and my friends to get down to brainstorming and make this game. Me and my friends both came up with the idea that it would be a roguelike game where you would choose which path you fight on, magic or science, and then fight against the other side. I went with that idea and instantly started working on what the character for the magic side would look like. He turned out pretty good, and I finally got to start coding the player movement. The script for player movement was pretty simple. Just use WASD to move in the corresponding direction. Then I had the camera snap to the player, which was a bit too janky for my taste, so I made a script to make the camera nice and smooth. Then I removed the smooth camera so I could check that all the components I add in the future would be working properly, and then add the smooth camera back in later. I then made a fireball sprite, which would then be used for my shooting script. And after I made the script, I started working on the first and easiest enemies that would be encountered in this game. And let's just say we went through a lot of redesigns. Oh god. Oh no. Oh no! But yeah, after Dr. Eggman lost his little mustache and became bald like One Punch Man, we finally got a cool ass scientist. You know, after I asked Nick to help me out with it. But who cares about that little detail? We have to work on the little projectile this guy will make. So I went back into A-Sprite and started working on it. It came out looking nice, and now we need to make some code, the best part of the journey. The first thing added to the script was code that made it so that whenever the player entered a certain radius of the enemy would then follow the player. Then I added some code where if the enemy got too close to the player, it would stop. If the player rushed towards the enemy would back away from it. This made it so the enemy got in just the right spot to shoot, but didn't get too close to the player. Speaking of shooting, I made some pretty funny mistakes when making the projectiles do what I want. I wanted it so that wherever the enemy shot, the bullet would then face that way. At the start of it, I just had the bullet appear, so it looked kinda janky. After some bad coding, the bullet then spun around as if it was like a 3D object, and it was very strange and very funny. Time to check out what my other friends were doing. Jacob was still experimenting with music, so he hadn't developed any songs for my game yet. Nick was working on a wall and tile asset, and one of my friends was making some, very interesting trailers.
Bruh. 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 Bruh.
They're all down in the description if you would like to see more. They're just pure gold. I had to include it in this video. Anyways, after reviewing what my friends did, I made a health system for my game so that whenever the player got hit by the projectile from the enemy, the player would take damage. It was time for the player to be able to inflict damage on the enemies. All I had to do to add damage was just to copy the same thing that I used for my health system, where the player gets intercepted by an enemy bullet and takes damage, and just copy it over for an enemy, but instead of it being an enemy bullet, it's a player's bullet. Let's check on Nick. So Nick finished up some assets for my game. One of them turned out nice, it was the lab tile, but the other one was 2 pixels too short and it was the wall tile. I asked Nick about it and he said that I should just fix it in A-Sprite, and then I also needed Nick to make me some other wall tiles for my levels, and then he didn't really respond, so I ended up just making it myself. It turned out that Nick lost passion for the project, which is alright. I mean, like, imagine if one of your friends told you, hey, you want to participate in a game jam? That could be a little bit stressful, you know? So you say you didn't really want to work on it. I was like, that's okay, I can make the assets. So yeah, this is about the time where I got into the groove of making stuff for the game jam. Since I made all these other components, I knew what to do to be able to experiment with new stuff, with new enemies and new assets. So it's time to review those. The first thing I got done was that I made 2 more sprites for the 2 enemies that I was going to add to the game. The first thing that I made that was actually coded was a turret enemy. The way it worked was that it was a stationary enemy that shot homing bullets. The way I made the homing bullets themselves was that I made it so that the bullets followed the player's current position, and then after a certain amount of time, the bullet would then die. It fought so hard, only to die in the end. That last sprite I made was the 3rd and final enemy that would be added to the game. The way this enemy would work is that it would kinda act like the homing bullet that I made for the turret enemy, except it's an actual being that you can kill. It doesn't have a lifespan that just makes the enemy disappear. It does 2 damage, but it doesn't fire anything at you, it just comes after you and charges you. When you shoot it, it runs back away, and if you let it catch up to you, you can die pretty fast from it. In between making these 2 enemies, I decided to make potions. Here's a tip on how to make potions in your game. Just make a stationary bullet that instead of doing damage, heals. There you go. It was now time for the most, fun part of this journey. You see, what I would now be working on was random generation for levels. This would make it so that I don't have to design every level, but that also means that I would have to learn how to make randomized levels. Which probably took more time than just creating all the levels, but it also made the experience more worthwhile. So I think it was a good decision either way. So now it's time to explain how it works. The easiest way I could probably explain how the random generation works is it's like a jigsaw puzzle that's random. and the jigsaw pieces are levels. What I mean by that is I would make a bunch of levels with different entrances and exits. I would make a list of the levels, and then depending on what entrance came up from the last level and stuff like that, it would pick randomly and could join it, and then would continue on and on until it ended, thus making randomized levels for my game. Now we're almost done with the main core game, but first, let's check Jacob's new music that he sent me. Alright, pretty good. This music is perfect for the type of atmosphere that we want for this science level that you play in on the magic side. The music is very techno-y and it's really like weird and, kind of electric sounding. So yeah, time to work on the final piece of the puzzle that will finish all of this magic side. And that would be the boss. Now you see, the way this is gonna work is that the boss for the magic side is actually going to be the player for the science side. So when I'm making this, it's kind of going to be for both, which saves a lot of work. The bullet that I made for the boss is actually quite interesting. First, the boss shoots out what looks to be a potion, but not the right color, so you know it's bad, that does 2 damage if it hits you. But the real problem comes in is that this bullet acts like the first bullet we made. It shoots where the player was. But when it hits that target, it actually turns into 4 giant bullets that are all homing, and they come after you. This all causes a very intense boss battle where you're running around the boss trying not to get killed, and you're also trying to simultaneously shoot it, thus creating a hard boss battle. And with that, we can finally start work on the other side of the game, the science side, where you play as the scientist in the magic realm. Now let's run through all the redesigns I did for all the enemies. The first enemy I redesigned was the scientist. For this magic theme, I decided to make him look like a cultist. Like, maybe if this game actually had a lore, it would be like some follower of the magic side's leader. Next up was the turret enemy that shot the homing bullets. For that sprite, I decided to turn it into a little tiny wizard tower. And how does that relate to the magic theme? I don't really know. It's a wizard tower and I make it shoot magic missiles. There you go. And finally, the giant robot that does a lot of damage. For that one, it was pretty simple. I made a giant troll. Don't want that thing touching me. Back away. And with that out of the way, all we had to complete now was the boss. I mean, we already have the sprite, we just have to make the actual mechanics of the boss battle. And to do that, I decided to borrow some mechanics that I've already coded. You see, the way the boss battle works is that the boss shoots out a little spell. Now this bullet can't hurt you, but what it does is really scary. When the spell reaches the target, it uses the random generation I used for the levels to spawn a random projectile. Basically, the bullet will have a list of things it can choose, like enemies, projectiles, and I made sure that it usually picks projectiles and not enemies. That's so the boss battle doesn't get too hectic, but otherwise, I would say it's a pretty interesting boss battle. And with that, my game is completed. Other than a few bits that I made, like a fading in transition, the menu, and an endless mode, that was it. All we needed to do now was wait for Jacob to complete those 2 tracks left for my game. The first one he sent me was the song that would be played in the Magic Realm. It sounds interesting, it's really upbeat, and there's nothing really wrong with it. And the next one he sent me was the menu theme, which sounded creepy and eerie, which was very strange. Look, just give it a listen. You get what I mean, right? The theme of the game wasn't really like this. Later on, after I uploaded it, because I needed to put this in, we were running out of time, he said it didn't really fit it, and we both agreed it wasn't the best track. But it was the menu music, so it wouldn't get annoying. And with that, everything was done, and I could relax. At the end, when I posted the game for the game jam, there was actually some major problems with it. One, I accidentally did a typo for the crossed world sentence. And the other was this bug that I was trying to fix that I still hadn't fixed. What it was is that in the Unity editor, the game would work fine. It would work perfectly. But when you build it, sometimes a hitbox wouldn't be made and the character would be invincible, or just a bunch of problems would occur. And I couldn't fix everything. So it really hurt the game because of that. Now it's time for the results. And nothing. I didn't get into any ranking. But that's not the point. What the point of the game jam was, is I did my first game jam, I got the experience, and I had a lot of fun with my friends. And it ended up with me making this video, which I hope it made your day a little bit more interesting. If you liked what you've seen today, consider subscribing to my channel, maybe looking at my other social medias down in the description. Most of my social media knowledge is in Discord, so if you would like to get in touch with me or know what I'm doing, it would probably be your best bet to join my Discord server. And with that, I bid you farewell.